YouTube. So I'm going to go ahead and do that so that we can have a recording of it. And it'll be publicly available. I might be able to save it and take it off, but that's what we're doing for now.
Veronica, are you seeing the right version of this, or are you seeing the wrong version of this?
It looks like, oh, it's the correct version. Oh, wait, no, that's the wrong one.
Okay, and 1 second. Now it should be right.
Yep, there you go.
Right.
And we've got a bunch of people in here now, so I think we can go ahead and get started, and I'll just keep letting people in as it happens, as they come in.
Sounds good. So I am just messing with some views on my screen right now, everybody, so I can see you. Hi. Again, see so many of my favorite folks out there right now. Mendocino County. I have had the pleasure to work in Mendocino County now for several years, before the pandemic, so I guess that counts for several years. And this is the first time we've really brought a lot of providers together to talk in space around street outreach. And in my conversations with Veronica and Brian and Aya, we really talked about needing to understand the context of street outreach and what it really looks like now, today, versus what it historically has been. Plus, how to collect data. It is not an easy environment in which data collection can flow. We're talking to someone in crisis. We're talking to someone outside. So we're going to talk a lot today about how, I'm sorry, I got something going on over here. How that can look in the street outreach environment for collecting data, and just how to do street outreach now in a place where we look at housing problem solving. We look at doing housing-based case management, not just survival-based case management through our street outreach program. So with that, Veronica, are you seeing the right thing now? Because my screen changed again.
It's not the full screen, it's like the actual PowerPoint, and now it's the wrong screen.
Yep.
There you go.
That's correct. Okay. So today I'm going to go ahead and walk through the first part of this. My colleague and good person Melissa will be joining me. So we'll go ahead and just hop right in. So again, thank you for joining us for this Mendocino County meeting. My name is Chris Bitcher. I'm from ICF. I am what is known as your regional team point of contact. So anything that needs to happen within your COC from a HUD standpoint, I can help with. That is one of the ways in which I'm here today. But I also manage the ESG-CV contract training and technical assistance for the state California Department of Housing and Community Development. So you probably have seen me before. I know a lot of faces here. We do a lot of trainings. So that is me. I identify he, him, his, and I am white. My co-presenter is based in Fresno, California. Melissa, would you like to say hello?
Hi, everybody. Oops, camera dip. Hi, everybody. Melissa Michael here. She, her, hers. Mexican American. As Chris said, I am in Fresno, California. I haven't seen many or any of you. I work with Veronica and Brian and Aya with the HMIS Capacity Building Grant. But here and excited to be on a call with some West Coast people.
A very proud Fresnonian, if that is what you call yourselves in Fresno, is Melissa Michael. As you can tell from our picture, she is very outgoing. I'd rather be hidden behind a ski mask and on a mountain all by myself, if that were allowable 24/7, but it is not. So we will move forward. I'm going to do a deep dive into street outreach, kind of the philosophy, the background. What is street outreach supposed to be doing? I think my understanding of street outreach has evolved greatly in the last 20 years of my involvement in homeless services. And I think certainly since the pandemic, street outreach and the way we talk about it has changed significantly. So I really want to talk about the philosophy of that, give you some tools on how to do it safely. We have had some circumstances arise, not necessarily in Mendocino County, but in other places where street outreach workers have been threatened or violence. So we want to kind of talk a little bit through that. This is not an easy job. This is not a job for everyone. Street outreach is so critical in our emergency services, but it is a difficult job. And I'm going to talk through the difficulties of said job. So was our purpose? What is street outreach really meant to do? We need to engage folks living in an unsheltered situation. We want to use person-centric outreach to build rapport. Our main job, as I see it, is to build relationships. We find someone, they're in crisis, we help them with those crisis things, we provide them survival materials, but our real goal is to build a relationship and trust so that we can get them from unhoused to housed. We are currently at California HCD looking at outcomes for street outreach, and it's the same outcomes that HUD wants to see, which is positive housing placements. When you have a person in street outreach, you can get them in shelter or transitional housing or rapid housing or permanent housing or EHV. It's a huge win. We do not have this idea that our homeless service system is a straight line. You're homeless on the street, you go to shelter, you go to transitional housing, you go to permanent housing. It's not that way. Anyone on the street can go straight into permanent housing, rapid rehousing. That's your job. Build those relationships. And ultimately, the folks on the street are the folks that have either been hurt by services or won't access our services. So we have to know that going in, that we've already got someone who has elected not to access our services if we have any available. We might not have any available, but if we do, they've elected not to, and it's not their fault they're not getting into our services. It's our services fault that we're not serving the client where that client is at. So you are meeting with a lot of folks who need a lot of help, but we don't just need to give them services. We do need to link them to services if there are things they need, but we're not here to fix people. We are here to house people. That is our most important thing. Housing is the focus of street outreach, not simply survival assistance. Survival assistance is hugely important to make sure that folks are safe, to make sure that in the situation, as bad as it is, they are going to be as successful as possible. But we really want to see folks get back into housing. So some of the services we can provide, engagement, that is the relationship building part. The first time you meet someone on the street, buy them a cup of coffee, buy some food, just say hello, start building that relationship. I find that great street outreach workers really just kind of connect human to human. Maybe the street outreach workers have been homeless before and they have lived experience and they can talk about that. Or you've been around and know encampments and you can talk about maybe folks they know. That rapport building and helping folks through crises, through the emergencies, through the crisis that they're in is really important. Getting folks to services that they want, not services that you want for them. Services that they want is also a really important thing. Addressing urgent things. As I said, survival street outreach isn't the end, it's the beginning. Do you need food? Do you need a sleeping bag? Flashlight? Hygiene? What can we do to make your situation that is bad a little bit better on the way to getting you housed? Providing transportation. I am sure that Mendocino County's transportation system is not fantastic. You probably do not have a subway that runs from the coast to inland. I doubt there is a series of trains and buses you can take. It is probably extremely difficult to get around. So can you do things like ride sharing or use your vehicle as a street outreach worker to help folks get to and from places they need to go? That is a really important thing in a more rural setting, is just getting folks to places they need to be. Whether that's maybe being assessed for coordinated entry, or maybe that's hooking them up with a provider that has services that can help them. Transportation is a big deal. I could spend an entire hour on housing problem solving. I will not. I'll just spend a few minutes. I promise. I'll move along quickly. But helping folks get into a housing plan, to understand how they can get into services and housing services in particular. A lot of our folks on the street have support networks still. Can we help get them back into those support networks? Is it something simple? I know that Veronica and Megan were working on, I think we call it a barrier buster fund. I can't remember what it was exactly called, but maybe you just need $100 to get back, to family. Or maybe you need an ongoing subsidy of a few $100s for food to kind of stay housed with relatives. How can we problem solve the issue at hand, which is you are on the street? How can we get you housed? Maybe it is shelter. Maybe it is rapid housing and permanent housing. It could be living with friends or family again. That is a very successful outcome that can happen. And we find that when you do those little things around housing problem solving, they have a big impact, because instead of a couple $100 here and getting them housed, instead of going through emergency shelter, traditional housing, permanent housing, rapid rehousing, and spending all that money, we've had a little investment and a big impact, and that client did not have all of that trauma going through that broken system. Connection to emergency services is important. First aid, urgent care, certainly if there's mental health or physical health problems we need to address, that is another very important service that we can provide. I see there's stuff in the chat. If it's questions, can someone flag them for me so I can shut up and answer them? Because I cannot see what's happening.
It's me, Chris. I'm just adding little notes. So I will absolutely 100% call your attention if there's any questions.
Thank you. I was so anxious. I just want to reach up and touch that chat button, but I know it's going to mess up my entire screen. So I'm doing the best I can not to. So let's talk about the team approach. So within your community, within Mendocino County, you're a large rural community. You have street outreach services from many different community partners. So that is more true today in Mendocino County than it ever has been. ESG-CV has brought a bunch of new partners together. I will just call out a few. We now have street outreach programs in several tribal nations that serve within the Mendocino County community. We have, I believe McCavan is here. I believe Redwood is here. I don't know who everybody is, but there's a lot of different services. So how can we within our COC learn from one another, work together? Each of us has different skills. Maybe we have different types of service provisions. Maybe someone does the PATH program, which serves folks with mental illness. Certainly our tribal nation partners are looking for folks that are members of tribal nations. Maybe you're working with youth. Maybe you're working with someone else. But you're going to come across folks that aren't yours, that don't fall into your catchment. So how do you work with your partners? And how do we in this large jurisdiction make sure that we're not overstepping, that we're not both serving the same client and don't know it? We need to coordinate as much as is humanly possible. I can't tell you exactly what that looks like in Mendocino County, but I can say that this group can be talking and we can certainly figure out what that looks like. How do we kind of make sure that our street outreach isn't bumping into each other, but more so being coordinated? And I think the idea of teams is really important. There are encampments. There are places where you go into that you are not a guest. You are maybe seen as something other than a guest. You have to respect the fact that someone's tent, someone's encampment, that is their home. And you have to meet them there. That means you might need to go with someone else. There is nothing wrong with asking for help and not doing it on your own. So embracing that team mentality is really important. Approaching respectfully. I live in Denver, Colorado. Right downtown, we have a homeless encampment at the end of our street for a couple of years. We knew the folks all by name. They would come by, ask for water and food. They would get that. They knew that we were a safe spot. We could walk into that camp and be okay because they knew us. That's their home. We were neighbors. We were friends. If you don't have that relationship, do not roll up on an encampment or a person and just be like, hey, I'm here. Go slow, know who you are, announce yourself. If you have a name badge or a lanyard or something that says, I'm a street outreach worker, so that can help take away some of that defensiveness, some of that potential animosity. And wear comfortable clothes. It's really important. I am wearing a shirt that's buttoned up right now. If I'm going outside, this is going to be a t-shirt. I'm going to just look like a person walking down the street. I might have a lanyard. I might have something that identifies me as being here in more of an official capacity, but I'm definitely going to be relatable in the way I dress. You're going to see my tattoos. There's nothing wrong with that. This is how I look, and this is how people look out in the world. So don't be afraid of that, but do be comfortable. When you're going out, let folks know where you're going to be. If you do not return, that should be an alarm to somebody. So always let folks know where you're going to be. Colleagues, supervisors, someone within the system. Maybe it's just a list. I'm going to be at this encampment at 10. I'm going to be over here at noon, just so we kind of have an idea where you are. Go in pairs. Just watch your visual cues. If I'm walking up, my arms are crossed and I look hostile, or I have my hands in my pocket and you don't know exactly what I'm up to, that can be a signal to someone that I don't necessarily trust you. You don't look friendly. So just notice those signs. And if you are seeing signs back that folks don't want you to approach, don't do it. There'll be a time that you will be accepted. It might take a few times, but don't just go to a place where it doesn't look like you're welcome and try to go in there and make yourself welcome. This is important, to trust your gut. If it doesn't feel right, come back later. Come back another day. If there's a situation that looks very escalated, wait. You don't have to do this right now. Come back later. This is an important one. We are not law enforcement, nor should we put ourselves in a situation where things might escalate. So if you are seeing something that doesn't look right, drugs, sex, something like that, that is not your role. Do not intervene. You may put yourself in more danger than actually helping the situation. So just kind of remember things like that. That is not what we're there to do. So when you're planning, think about scheduling, the schedule, getting into a routine. Routines are great. If you know an encampment and you are going to be there on Tuesdays, they know you're going to be there on Tuesdays, it kind of can help a little bit. Maybe there's a food pantry program that you're kind of taking some folks to or working with, or maybe there's a bunch of folks that need to get to the bus station and you're kind of being there at that same time. Identify where you're going to be, who you're going to be with, and kind of get into a routine. Routines are comfortable for me. Routines are also comfortable for folks experiencing crisis because it brings a little bit of normalcy to what is an otherwise very abnormal situation. Melissa, what's up?
I just wanted to see if everybody else's chat was also disabled. If they needed to ask questions, I didn't see that, or if they knew how to use the raise the hand function.
Absolutely. Thanks, Melissa. Veronica, you want to go ahead and address that?
Yeah, the county changed our settings to where if we had chat enabled, it could only be a one-way communication from the host or co-host. So my apologies. I can send you information, but you can't reply or anything. So please raise your hand. Feel free to interrupt. Chris is totally chill with you. Just, hey, I got a question.
Absolutely. Raise your hand. Many of you know me. Just say, hey, Chris, I have a question. If you don't, my name's Chris. Feel free to say it. Happy to stop at any time if anything doesn't make sense, or if you'd like to just put an example out there of something that you've seen or noticed. Another thing about the planning part, think about when you can be in an unsheltered situation where folks might be there. It might be the day. Maybe that entire encampment has a job and you have to go later in the day or early in the morning. Really know your audience, know what that feels like, and ask, what's the best time for me to come by to keep our relationship going? And I even say it that way, the relationship, like we are in this together. Also, I didn't say this in one of the earlier slides, and it probably comes up in the later one, but I'll say it now. Never promise something you will not deliver. Cardinal sin. That's the fastest way to break your relationship. So don't promise things you cannot deliver. So lead with the purpose. When you're there, what is the purpose? Why are you there? I'm here to connect you to housing. I'm here to connect you to services. Remember that your agency isn't just a feeding program or a clothing program. You're a housing program for folks in extreme crisis, folks on the street. So that is your focus, is getting them housed. Now, getting them to housing might mean you have to do 100,000 things to do it, but that's still the goal at the end of the day. We want to see you not here anymore. And unlike some of the ways that we think about unsheltered homelessness, we're not trying to hide folks. We're trying to house folks. A lot of the things we hear around encampment, safe parking or this or that, these things we're trying, is about us as humans not seeing humans in crisis. That's not what we're trying to do. We are trying to get them from a bad housing situation to a better housing situation, a positive housing situation. Offer supplies always, but that is not your primary purpose. That might be the thing you have today that makes the connection, that keeps your value for that client and builds that relationship, but it's not the thing at the end of the day that's going to get folks housed. And I told you this is going to be on the slides. I'm just going to say it again. Always be clear what you can and cannot provide. Do not offer something that you just don't have the capability to provide. So a few things you can think about when you're engaging with folks in an unsheltered situation. You can say things like, what kind of services are you interested in today? Or what will it take to help you move forward to get to housing? You can do some of that housing problem solving just with simple, open-ended questions. Listen to folks' stories. I have found, at least in my work, that oftentimes once you've made that connection, you've built some trust, folks want to often tell their stories once they trust you. They don't just want to tell it to relive the trauma, but there's things in that is that's a release. There is a reason that some of us seek out mental health services or therapists to talk about things and work through and process things. Folks in crisis have the same thing, and they've got piles and piles of trauma to talk through. So listen, ask very simple open-ended questions. So outreach, so remember that your skill is connecting folks to housing services, whether that's housing services you offer or other folks through the COC, helping folks navigate what is an otherwise confusing system. Coordinated entry is not intuitive to me. I've been in the homeless service system for 20 plus years. If you are on the street and you don't even know that the coordinated system exists, how are you going to navigate that? You have to help folks get through that. We are not a logical system. There is nothing about what HUD has produced around COC, ESG, coordinated entry that is necessarily logical to a person experiencing homelessness. So be that guide, be that person that can help unsheltered folks get into some permanent housing. I lost my mouse. I have too many screens. The mouse sometimes goes off. So just thinking about what skills it takes to be a good outreach worker, and I want to be very clear. I am a terrible street outreach worker. I have tried it. I've also tried running a shelter. Not very good at it. I can do it, but I lack the skills to draw personal barriers and professional barriers. Folks who do this work well can do that, and it is such a beautiful skill. And if you're one of those people, I'm just saying it to you now. I am so impressed. I cannot do it. I subsume myself with other people's crisis until I myself am in crisis. That is not a way to go. But what we've seen with successful street outreach workers is folks who have patience, flexibility. You're not judging. If you're there using drugs, okay, that's your thing. I know lots of people who have homes on my street that use drugs. Okay, they're able to maintain it. It is not the thing. I'm not judging you because you use drugs. I'd rather you didn't, and I will give you tools to reduce that harm in your life. But that's where you're at. I am not your judge. I am not your jury. You are just a person who needs housing, and I can help you with that. Kindness, empathy, being relaxed, culturally competent is very important. We come across folks from all walks of life, and we don't necessarily know their culture. So we need to kind of do our homework, understand what our clientele look like, how we might be inadvertently offending them or producing microaggressions because we haven't been culturally competent. Resourcefulness is really key. There are a lot of things you might be asked to do in your relationship with someone unhoused that is unorthodox. But think about it, be resourceful. That's part of building trust and calm, trust and relationships. Be assertive, calm, and level-headed. If there's anything else, you cannot put it in the chat because we don't have it. That's where I would do this normally. If there's anything else you think is really important, I'm going to take a second to just breathe and have you think of anything else that is really important as far as skills you see useful to street outreach, the street outreach environment. Okay. I'm not seeing anything or hearing anything. Melissa, anything? Oh, Natalie,
Natalie.
I see you waving. Hello, Natalie.
Hi, Chris. I think you got it all. I mean, I don't think I could add to it, but resourceful, I was also thinking like remedy. Like that is a skill, is to kind of see, I mean, you're not gonna, a remedy is like solving like a solution, but I think a remedy also could be a skill as that person seeing, you know, some of the things that they'll need to commit to maybe make it successful. So maybe being able to kind of just produce like a visual remedy in your mind of, you know, as you're talking to that person or getting a feel for what kind of situation they're in, you kind of have to also develop some sort of a remedy, just to even a path, just to start, like, you know, where do you start? So I always find not really calling it a remedy, but actually producing something in your own mind that can lead you into, okay, let me wrap my head around this person. Let's see where do we start? So it's maybe not a solution, but I think it's a remedy. Like, you have to start somewhere, and it does take a skill. Not everybody can provide a remedy in whatever situation it might be, but I just thought that might be a keyword. So thank you.
I appreciate that, Natalie. Thank you very much. I now have the song Remedy from the Black Crow stuck in my head, but that's a whole different thing. That's on me. It's a good song, by the way. Melissa, anything to add here before I move forward that you were thinking of?
I think one of the things too, Chris, when you touched on if you're going into an encampment or if you're going to be working with somebody and you see maybe a drug deal or sex work going on or anything along that, the non-judgmental part is, I think you also really need to watch your body language because you'll have people watching you to see what you're like. I think the other thing that we need to be conscious of is that many of those who are experiencing homeless right now have already gone through so many certain systems, and they may see you coming in as just another system. Is this a system that's going to fail me? Well, I know that, I had that one worker one time who judged me. So a lot of the skills that Chris has listed on, yes, we can practice that, but we also have to look at what does our body language look like too, when we're with people, when we're walking away, when we're going towards our car, because they'll be watching us the whole time as well too.
Absolutely. Thanks, Melissa. Sita, I see your hand raised.
Can you talk, you and Melissa or both or someone, talk towards wearing like sunglasses, hats with particular logos or not logos, because I feel those are important things. So
why don't you, Sita, keep on expounding upon it. This is, you have your own thoughts here. I don't have particular thoughts on those things other than when I go out and interact, I generally dress pretty boring. I'm pretty good at having a lot of solid colors, dark grays. That's how I do it. But what were you thinking specifically? I didn't have anything in my mind on that.
Specifically, I'm thinking things like dark glasses, like especially when I'm interacting with someone I don't know as well, or trying to build a relationship that includes both, Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people. I make sure that I'm not wearing dark glasses that shield my eyes so they can't see my eyes. Like, eyes play a big role in building trust and, relationships. Then the other thing is like, kind of what is on your hat or your shirt, that's just like culturally competent and just more sensitive, again, maybe you are okay later once you've established the relationship, but just, those are maybe like little details, but probably kind of contribute to all of that.
Right. It's good to be approachable. And when you're approaching someone to not be threatening in anything. And, there are certain emblems that I see in my daily thing that upset me because I know they're tied to white national extremism or other things like that immediately tell me that you're not a person I want to interact with. So you certainly don't want to bring any of that energy or any of those iconographies with you into a space. Melissa, anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I'm not sure, Mendocino, if y'all have this this issue or not, but being where I'm at in Fresno when doing street outreach, we had certain neighborhoods that were gang related, or if we had certain gangs that were watching over encampments, we really did have to be careful on the colors that we wore when we went out and did outreach. So that's also something to look towards. And then going along the lines of what Sita was saying, as far as the dark glasses or not looking at someone eye and eye. If you're going out with a partner, no, not if, when you go out with a partner, and you're working on building that engagement, you might have to get down to the level of where the person's at. Maybe the person is doesn't want to come out of their tent, or they open up their tent only to a certain level. Work on that with your partner. Who's going to be the one that maybe gets down to the level of where the person is at, while your partner is maybe watching your back or watching your surroundings as well too. So, you don't want to have that dynamic of when street outreach is happening and maybe you have somebody who's sitting down and then you're up here talking to them, and it's kind of like you're looking down at the person rather than having that conversation, eye to eye. That's, to me, that was huge in building relationships out there. The other time is, I know that we want to have that separation between work and non-work, and I'm probably bad with boundaries as Chris is, but when you're doing that street outreach, you're going to probably see some of those that you've had contact with when you're not at work.
Yep.
But still, what are maybe some of the boundaries that you want to talk to? And if you have a family with you, or if you have your family with you, let them know about the work that you do too, because you may just have to have a time where you talk and you just say, hey, John, how are you doing? Hopefully everything's going well. Hey, can we get together on Monday? I'll be by on Monday, or something along those lines. Because again, like I said, I think the biggest thing is you don't want to be the system again for this individual. You want to be personable. And, John's going to know, oh yeah, it's on a Sunday. This person's probably having, breakfast or something with the family. But hey, that person still acknowledged me. I'm still a person. So yeah.
Yeah. Well said, Melissa. And living in a small community, I know that that. There's a reason I live in Denver and know not a lot of people, because I don't want to bump into folks outside of me. That's just my personal feeling. See,
Chris,
there's
can
one-
I add something very quick following on to what Melissa said? Is one of the things that you may want to ask, like what she said, meeting them at, on the street, or like in a grocery store. And Chris and Melissa, check me if I'm wrong. It would be good if you ask them, how would you like to be addressed, in those situations. I know I've done that when I was an advocate, because not everyone wants to be known that, outside of that relationship. So that's like part of the respect, is ask, them, how do you want me to address you, if I meet you, in XYZ.
Yeah, very well said. Thanks.
I'm kind of curious with our providers, if anybody has run into any local issues with, gang territories or anything like that, where maybe an encampment is protected. I know, Leanna, you've had some extensive experience, as well as Amanda and some of our Fort Bragg staff. Anybody have any instances or stories to share about maybe an experience you had? No? That's okay. No pressure. Thanks.
It's a good problem not to have. You don't have to have it. All right. So we know that some folks, and just setting expectations for us, are not going to initially accept any offers from us. At first, it might just be, yeah, I want to talk to you for a little bit. That's good enough for me. I'm done. I'll take that cup of coffee, but I'd rather be alone right now. Building rapport and relationship is the key to this. I'm going to turn this over in a second to Melissa to talk about data collection and how important data is. But you cannot roll up on the camp and say, all right, everyone, social security numbers out now, give them to me. I need to know your birth dates. Come on. You've got to get that. So Melissa's going to talk about a process that we've developed to collect data at the national level over time. I'm going to say it now, though. The relationship trumps everything. If talking about collecting data is getting in the way, wait. There's always another day for that. The relationship takes everything. Always focus on getting folks into a permanent, stable, safe housing. It is important to provide harm reduction things like survival equipment and what have you, but that's not the goal. The goal isn't to maintain someone's street homelessness, it's to end someone's street homelessness. Here are a few resources. Mendocino County. We built this from California stuff mostly, so you'll see yourselves in there. We've got our friends from Shasta, Tulare, Sonoma, LA, San Diego. So if there's anything in here you would like to give us, I would like to look at more, we will give that to you. We are this material, I believe Veronica already has it in fact, but is yours. It's not ours. So with that, I think I am going to pause there on policy design and go into the very exciting piece of data collection. This is exciting for me and Melissa because we're data people, but it's really more interesting to talk about street outreach and data collection in the fact that it's not the most important thing, but it needs to happen at some point. So I'm going to leave it there, and Melissa, just let me know when you want to move forward.
I'm ready. So yeah, the first thing that I do want to say about data collection is, being HMIS lead in my former community, I was a stickler for having, like 100% data entry and questions answered. And when it came to street outreach, it was like, what? Like my neck would start doing this little twitching thing. Like, no, this isn't right. Like you have to have data. But like Chris said, don't let that data collection be in the way. You're not going to go out there with it. Don't go out there with the expectation that I'm going to get, all of this information the first time that I meet somebody. As you know, you all have probably been doing street outreach for a while. And on a good day, it's great if you can get the person's first name at least. I think one of the other things too that is important to practice, and if you're taking notes, I would suggest to write this down. Chris was saying that, when you go into an encampment and you're introducing yourself as, a street outreach worker, I've done that before too. And one of the questions that I've received is, well, what is that? So I want you to write this down. What does it mean to be a street outreach worker? How are you going to explain that to somebody that you're approaching when you're doing street outreach? What words do you use so that it's not so HUD defined? So what does it mean to be a street outreach worker? So if somebody comes and asks you, oh, okay, so street outreach worker, what is that? What do you do? Especially if this is something that's new to Mendocino, you're going to have those that are experiencing homelessness may not know what a street outreach worker does. So how do you explain that? How do you explain that in a way that you're starting to build that rapport? So I wanted to leave you all first thing with that. So our street outreach data collection, especially for ESG, is designed to support the interactions and the development of that relationship with clients over time. To some of the data collection, you're going to see that there's times that we have to, as staff, mark in HMIS every time that we meet with somebody on the streets. That's going to also be another thing that I think that you should put into your planning is when you plan your day, also plan for the time that you need to go back to the office and do street outreach. What is better for you? Is it better for you to do data entry twice a day, maybe midday and at the end of the day? Is it better to do it or just at the end of the day? One thing for sure, though, I would say and suggest is to maybe in your car is to also have maybe a notebook so that there's notes that you can take. Because I think after you see so many people or have contact with so many people throughout the day, it gets kind of jumbled onto who you're talking to, what you did with that individual. So if you can take a few moments, and again, when you're planning your day, when are you going to take your notes that would then translate into some of that data collection? So this, again, is important to view the flow of this as sequential, but also to understand that a client may move in and out of each phase. So, you may be engaged with the client, you may not be engaged with the client. A client may say, hey, I love you. Yes, let's move forward. Let's get this housing stuff, taken care of. And then the next day they're like, no, for the next month or so, they may be like, no, I don't want to talk to you anymore. And that's okay. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, Chris. Other way. So this is going to outline a little bit about data collection flow So street outreach is different than some of your regular data collection. We look at things such as a project start date, you have your engagement, and then you have your project exit. So your project start date is going to be the first time that you make contact with a client. Now, this is also going to be maybe a little bit difficult to establish because, as you know, in HMIS, you have to put in somebody's name into the system to get like a record started on them. So you may only know the person's first name. You may only know that the person's name is Jenny. So maybe you write Jenny, but you also know that she's in the encampment on H Street. So she may be Jenny on H Street. She may be, you know, Jenny in the purple tent for a while. But you're going to have to make sure that you put a project start date in HMIS with the information on the first contact. And again, the first contact is anytime that you have that interaction with somebody. So on here, it says that contacts are collected in the HMIS by entering the date and the location of each client interaction. And if I remember correctly, it's not the exact location, but if it's something that's like on the street or where that person's current living situation is. You may have a few contacts, and you probably are going to have a few contacts before you get to that date of engagement. The date of engagement, I do want to read what the data standards has, and it says, per the HMIS data standards and by agreement across all federal partners, an engagement date is the date when an interactive client relationship results in a deliberate client assessment or beginning of a case plan. So that's when the date of engagement should be entered into HMIS. That definition is very, very broad. One of the things that I would suggest, and Chris was talking about it earlier, was, you know, working with your other street outreach partners. How do you all determine what that date of engagement looks like with somebody? The caveat that I'm going to also add to that too is when you have a date of engagement entered into HMIS, it's expected that all the data elements are also collected during that time. So one of the things that I would tell my street outreach staff and other agencies is, you know, that's really when a lot of that trust has already been established. You know, even if date of engagement may not even be that the person's saying, I want housing, but more of, hey, Melissa, I entrust you with my information so that we can start talking about services. And that's going to also be something else that you want to practice is how do you explain what those services are? If you start asking certain data elements, how do you explain why it's important to collect that? Because people are going to want to know, why do you want to know this information about me? You know, is it for services? Is it for, you know, what a lot of times I would like to use, you know, we like to collect data, you know, people use data all the time. We like to collect data to see what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? What are we missing? You know, we've used that before too as well. But get together. That's when you all establish that date of engagement. To me, that was huge. That was important. And to make sure that the other street outreach providers, that you are all in sync on what it meant for a date of engagement, what that definition was, or what that looked like in the real work area. When you also have your project exit. So your project exit is going to be basically when that person leaves, staying on the street. So whether it's through stable permanent housing, Chris talked about what those positive housing placements is a goal. And so it's pretty much a goal of moving somebody off of the street. You know, we transition them to some mainstream resources, whether that's emergency shelter, transitional housing, you know, if we get them reunited with family, or we don't have contact with a client for a set period of time. And that's determined by the COC. Typically, I've seen 90 days where there has been no contact with the client. And you're also going to want to define that. Is it that the client is not talking to me, or is it that just because the client is not talking to me and I still see them as on the street, do I want to exit them, or do we want to still keep them open under street outreach? Because that kind of keeps a numeric number of people that we know that are still on the street, because there's a difference of not seeing somebody for over 90 days and, okay, we're still seeing them, but they're just not having contact with me. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And so this just goes into a little bit more of what that project start date is. I'm going to pause on each of these really quickly just to see if anybody has questions or needs a little bit more clarification on the project start, engagement, or project exit. So again, this just, oh, go ahead, Veronica. So this just breaks down a little bit more of what the project start date. Something to mention is that at this early stage, it's not anticipated again that you're going to get all of the client information again, but you should start that record in HMIS. Again, it may be Jenny in the red hat on H Street. And how do you continue to build upon that? You're also going to want to work with your HMIS system admin, because maybe we put as the first name Jenny and the last name is Red Hat. You're going to want to work with your system admin. Okay, it's like, hey, I now know that Jenny's last name is Garcia. How do I change Jenny from the Red Hat to Jenny Garcia? And poor Aya is going to kill me for this, but she will help you get fixing that. And if Aya does not know, then I can go ahead and assist with that as well too. But you're, so on the HMIS system admin side, it's going to look messy. This data is going to look messy because street outreach isn't easy on entering that data. And that's okay. And anytime you guys have questions, ask your HMIS admin. They'll work with you and we'll get through this and we'll get some good data in there as well. Let's go ahead and go on to the next slide. So talking about engagement, and let's go ahead and go to the next slide there. So again, by this point of engagement, again, that street outreach worker has established that relationship with the client and knows more about their situation. Again, it is the expectation as a system admin, it was my expectation at this point that the street outreach worker was able to collect all of those universal data elements and those common program specific data elements once they entered that date of engagement. Anytime you are entering data for a street outreach program, anytime prior to entering that date of engagement, your data quality is not tracked, or it is tracked, but it's not being counted against anybody. Once you enter in a date of engagement, it's like, bam, in HMIS, that data quality is beginning to get tracked. So that's also something to think about, is we don't want to feel like we're being rushed, or you don't feel like you're being rushed that you have to have a date of engagement. Like, this shows that I'm like the best street outreach worker out there because I have a date of. Don't even think about that. It's, again, that relationship that you build with your client. It's that trust that the client, that you have with that client, that they're giving you this information. And again, practice with people, practice with your coworkers. How are you going to go about talking with somebody and gathering that information so that, again, you're not seen as the system when you're working with the person. It shouldn't be so much like, okay, now it's data collection time. How do you work this information into conversations with those that are living or staying on the streets?
And I've defined engagement a little less strictly than HUD has in this point. I usually talk about engagement as the aha moment with a client. Oh, well, you can help me, and I want that help. And it could take a day, it could take a year, it could take multiple years. But there's a point where that happens, and so long as an assessment or a housing plan begins, that's really the strict definition from HUD. But for me, it's that thing. The client's like, oh yeah, I get it now. Lights on, let's go. Then you got to collect the data. So I just wanted to kind of put that in there. That's how I've always conceptualized it and talked about it, as like, aha, let's go down.
Let's continue on. So project exit, and we look at this already. I'm looking at the time. So project exit, when do we exit clients from a street outreach project? So it's, again, when they achieve that stable housing, or they're enrolled in another appropriate housing project or mainstream services that do not require the continued provision of street outreach. Or it says that they leave the project, they pretty much leave street outreach. You're not able to locate them. Something else I have also seen too is when you have multiple street outreach projects that are working in the community, I'm hoping that your HMIS system is open so that if you have street outreach project 1 and street outreach project 2, I can at least see, if I'm street outreach project 1, I can at least see that, oh, hey, street outreach project number 2 is working with this person as well. Again, that goes back to that working with your partners that Chris was talking about, maybe having, sometimes they call it like street outreach conference calls. And I can say, hey, street outreach project 2, I see that you're also working with Jenny Garcia. You know, this is the one that I'm working with. Having that conversation of, okay, is it best that you still work with them? Is it best that I still work with them? Maybe we can collaborate together. So utilizing HMIS in that way, as far as being a case management tool as well, like Chris was talking about, so that we're not duplicating those services as duplicating those services too, with those on the streets. Want to add this thing about the asterisk. The street outreach can continue when a client is housed in emergency shelter or rapid rehousing to ensure that the client does not return to homelessness and is dependent upon the relationship developed by the street outreach provider. Chris, I'm going to get clarification from you on this point, but when I was an admin, I would train my street outreach project that once the person was in some type of housing or shelter, that they should exit that person from street outreach. But as a street outreach provider, you can still provide maybe some of that drop-in services, see how they're adjusting. You don't want to just be like, okay, bye, you know, you're in a shelter now, peace out, it was great knowing you. But, you know, that time that you spent building up a relationship with that person, can you still go and talk with them? Nobody's saying that you're not going to, but you're just not providing a service while they're still staying in what's called like the street. Chris, any thoughts or other input on that?
Yep, this is actually a brand new asterisk, something we're working on currently right now with HUD to develop policy for the ESG manual, which would say what Melissa just said is absolutely correct the way the rules are written now. But the interpretation of that has been that some providers have just stopped the relationship when they get into shelter. What we see is that person leaves shelter and comes back to street outreach, and you have to rebuild that relationship. So if you being the connector for X amount of time in shelter or rapid rehousing is the thing that's going to keep them from being on the streets, HUD is telling you from a policy standpoint, do that thing. We have eligibility problems we're working on. Technically, street outreach cannot be provided in a facility, emergency shelter and rapid rehousing facilities. So there are things we have to work around, but HUD is very focused on it. The philosophy is if you're the thing keeping them housed, you keep doing that thing. So we're working on data guidance to support that, which is what Melissa just talked about.
It's also another time too where you can work with the staff at emergency shelter staff or the rapid rehousing staff, like, hey, can we both go talk to this client at the same time? You know, I've already built a relationship with them. And, you know, you can use that time to then with the emergency shelter staff or the other housing staff to help build that relationship that the client has with you now with them.
Veronica has her hand raised and we only have 5 minutes left. So we're probably going to go long. I'm just going to say that now.
Real quick, do they do the HMIS exit when the person goes into emergency shelter or rapid rehousing, but can continue providing services?
So I am writing that guidance now.
Okay.
What Melissa said is the guidance now, which is no, you would exit them. What we're working on is saying you don't have to exit them, but this is also not a backdoor way into InReach in working in shelters or working in rapid rehousing facilities. We have to kind of balance a line there. It is not written yet. In fact, it's sitting on my desktop to be written, but that's the guidance we're going to put out there. You don't necessarily have to exit them. so long as we have a guide that says this is how we're going to do it. So we have yet to finish the negotiations with HUD on that, to be honest.
But for now, we do exit them
Correct.
until Chris like brings out the sparkling new shiny guide. But for now,
September 22, somewhere in there. Natalie, I think I saw your hand raised.
Yeah, through the HMIS, I did notice that if you do exit them out, there is something that does like a 90-day follow-up on it. So I think, it does kind of trigger you that you can do a follow-up when you exit out. I haven't exited anybody out yet, but like Chris said, if you write the guidance on the best practice on that, let me know. Because right now, I assume once we exit, we'll still be following up with them the way the HMS, I mean, for us for sure, but HMS also triggers that 90-day follow-up as well. So just wanted to mention that. Thanks.
we have about 3 more slides left, and it's on record building protocols. I think we've touched on most of them, and y'all will receive this these slides too as well. One of the things that I wanted to touch on is it is very possible that you enter somebody or give somebody a project start date and you give them an exit without an engagement date. That is totally okay. It happens. We know that not all clients are going to be engaged. So don't feel that, you haven't seen this client, in 2 months, and you're like, well, I haven't seen this client, I should probably exit them out. Oh, do I need to put it in date of engagement? If the date of engagement did not happen, you do not need to put that in. It is also possible that the project start date and the date of engagement can be the same day. If you have somebody that is like, here you go, here's all of my information, I want anything and everything you have, and I will give you all of my information for you. That can happen very rarely. So just wanted to let you know about that as well too. This is just about record building protocols. When you're working with clients throughout street outreach, you're going to be building upon that data as well. So again, you'll have what you're inputting into HMIS, but you may also have to have like your own internal way of how you're keeping track of clients if it's not in the system as well. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And so outreach projects shall continue to engage with the clients to obtain client identifiable data, like we said before. The outreach data will not affect overall data quality until, again, that date of engagement is entered. Once that date of engagement is entered into HMIS, bam, it does that internal, that is like, okay, we're going to check your data quality. And, I always like to think like red flags are going off and, we need to have all that data in there. You also need to keep track of that non-identifiable data. So those clients, again, Jenny with the red hat on H Street, how are we going to keep track of that? Those are some things that you would need to work on and think about internally as well. Let's go ahead and go on to the last one. And so are there protocols on how to capture client de-identified data in HMIS prior to date of engagement? And this is all going to go into, the street outreach workers coordinate when there are de-identified clients to ensure that there are not 2 de-identified red hat lady records. And is there a process to remedy unknown duplicated de-identified client records? And are there protocols designed to occur prior to date of engagement? So these are going to be questions and things that you may want to work on. Again, that partnership with other street outreach workers, working with your HMIS system admin too, as well. Some of the questions we may get answers to, some we may not. We may have to still continue to work through them, but that's going to be big. So not only your communication with your clients, but also communication with your other street outreach outreach providers as well too. Chris, anything else that takes us to the 3 o'clock mark?
No, nothing else. That's the end of our presentation. Somehow we got there. right on time, but I have some time to stick to answer questions if you have any. I'm willing to do that, but I know folks have a busy schedules, so if you have to go, please do go. Thank you for listening, and I'm sure if there is additional needs around street outreach and things we can help work through, Veronica, raising your hand there, will be sure to coordinate that and help us get back in front of you. But I'm going to go ahead and I'll stay here for a little bit. If you want to go, please do go. But if you have questions, we'll stick around for a moment.
Thank you, Chris, Veronica. Really appreciate that. I'm going to leave,
Bye, Sita.
and Melissa too. Bye.
Bye, Sita.
Thanks, Sifa. Bye. I'll be reaching out to see about scheduling an actual coordination meeting so I can help you guys kind of figure out how to coordinate. So keep an eye out for that email. I'll probably do a doodle poll. I'll be reaching out to each agency to see who the appropriate contact staff are, because some managers might be want to involve, some won't. Sometimes I might have the wrong staff member identified. I met some new people here today. I saw some new faces I hadn't met before. So if I miss anybody, feel free to forward it. If I added somebody I shouldn't have, let me know and I'll take them off. And we'll kind of do those next steps of that local coordination.
Thank you, Veronica, Chris, Sita, Melissa. It was wonderful meeting you guys again and the team. Thank you.
You want Natalie? Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
All right. If you don't have any questions, I'll stick around. Anything we said around the data stuff that isn't, I know Brian has had a lot of questions, but anything that you have any questions on the data stuff we talked through?
Not particularly. I kind of, basically some of the things you said in terms of putting data together was sort of some of the challenges that I anticipated. I actually kind of look forward to the grand puzzle of like deduplicating and matching up that kind of information. So I'm not too worried about it. Obviously, I'll dig through the actual questions, like what we would use on any assessments connected to it and all of that in more detail later.
Great, cool.
The street outreach puzzle, that is so real. And I used to love that. I'd be like getting these questions like, oh yes, let's figure this out. That is fun. And it's gonna happen just because to me, it's kind of unrealistic to gather all this data when you're doing street outreach, but that's what our funders say that we need to do. But yeah, it can be done. It's fun if you like solving puzzles. Without having the picture of what you're solving for.
Not here.
Gary.
This is for Aya and Veronica. I called and sent you an email regarding my password so that I can enter data. I'm still not able to do it. I was wondering if you could give me a call and help me out or walk me through that.
Right after this meeting, I'll give you a call.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, see you guys.
Thanks, Gary. Good to see you. Okay, Veronica, anything else you want from us, or shall we?
Nope.
Okay.